Factoring. Basic factoring with x squared plus bxc formulas. Hosted by me, Catherine. So let's see what our objectives are today. Our first objective is to review the greatest common factor, or GCF. Our second is to review FOIL. And of course, while you're here, we're going to factor. We're going to use the reverse FOIL method. So first, let's review the greatest common factor. The first step in factoring is to find the greatest common factor for the terms of the polynomial. So what is the greatest common factor? Well, the greatest common factor is the largest term that is a factor of all the terms. So I know your next question is, well, what is a term? A term is a single number, a variable, or a combination of a number and a variable multiplied together. Terms are separated by plus and minus signs in an expression. Well, what is a polynomial then? Well, a polynomial is an expression with two or more terms. So let's look at our first example. We want to factor out the greatest common factor. So the first thing we have to do is list our terms. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to write each of the factors in each term. So what's a factor again? Well, remember, a factor is what we're multiplying together to get our term. So 2 times 2 times x is 4x squared. 2 times 2 times x times 8 is 32x. I'm lining up my common factors here. And then 28 is 2 times 2 times 7. And once again, I've lined up my common factors. What we do next is we're going to circle those. So we have a 2 times a 2. It turns out that our greatest common factor is 4. But we're not quite done yet because what we have to do is divide out the 4. Let's do that next. Here's our polynomial. We're going to be dividing out a 4. So that's why I have the 4 outside of my parentheses here. And what is it going to look like? Well, 4x squared divided by 4 is x squared. 32x divided by 4 is 8x. And then 28 divided by 4 is 7. And this is how we factor out the greatest common factor. Cool. But don't worry because we're going to factor this one in example 5. Our next step is to review FOIL. So hopefully you remember that FOIL is first, outside, inside, last. Let's get started. I'm going to multiply the first terms together. So I'm going to have x times x. Then I'm going to multiply the outside terms, which is x times negative 6. I'm going to multiply the inside terms, which is 2 times x. And finally, the last terms, 2 times negative 6. Cool. So let's simplify a little bit here. We're going to have x times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. 2 times x is 2x. And finally, 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. Our last step is to combine like terms. So hopefully you see that these are like terms. So we're going to have x squared. And then negative 6x plus 2x is negative 4x. And then finally, negative 12. Now that we understand the greatest common factor, and we reviewed FOILing, let's get right to factoring. Whenever we factor, we always have to ask, is there a greatest common factor? Well, if we look at this one, we have a 1 and a negative 4 and a negative 12. There isn't a greatest common factor for these. So we don't have to worry about that yet. Our next step is kind of a mystery, kind of a puzzle, but it's really cool. We need to figure out what multiplies to negative 12, this number, that also adds to negative 4, this number. So once again, we're finding numbers that add to the middle coefficient, which is negative 4, that also multiplies to the constant negative 12. Well, let's think about this for a couple minutes. I know that negative 1 times 12 is negative 12. That works great. But the only problem is that negative 1 plus 12 is negative 11, and we need negative 4. So for sure, that one's not going to work. So let's think of another multiplication. Well, I know that negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. Awesome. But when we add negative 2 plus 6, we get 4. And we're really looking for negative 4. But here's the awesome thing. Do you notice the only difference is a positive and a negative sign? So guess what? If we change our signs, notice I'm going to have a positive 2. I have a positive 2 and a negative 6. I still get negative 12. That's awesome. But when I take 2 plus negative 6, I get our negative 4. And that's what we want. So let me show you how easy it is to go from here to factoring. So what we do is we just take the first number that we added, this guy, and it's part of my first parentheses, x plus 2. I know it's a positive because this is a positive. And then the next one, what does that look like? Well, it's just x minus 6. And where did I get the minus 6? Well, it came right from here. I mean, how much easier can it get, right? We could also write it like this. Parentheses x minus 6 times parentheses x plus 2. Now you're probably wondering, well, why does that work? Well, we have a really cool property in mathematics. It's called the associative property. And it says it doesn't matter how we multiply. I could take negative 6 times 2 or 2 times negative 6. We get the exact same answer. So that means it doesn't matter if I FOIL this one or this one. I'm still going to end up with this answer. Cool. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, prove it to me, Catherine. Well, let me prove it to you right now. X plus 2 times x minus 6. So we have first x squared, outside negative 6x, inside 2x, and last negative 12, x squared. Negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4x minus 12. Well, that one works. Let's try this second way. So we have x minus 6 times x plus 2. Now I need to make sure that these are connected because that means multiplication. Our first is x squared. Outside is 2x. Inside is negative x. And last is negative 12. Oh my gosh, do you see where this is going? So we'll have x squared. 2x minus 6x is negative 4x. And then finally negative 12. Hey, either one of them works. So they're both perfect solutions to factoring. Now let's try this one. With this one, we still have to ask, doesn't matter, every single time, is there a greatest common factor? For some of you, you can see that it's 5. But for the rest of us, we need to multiply it out just to make sure. So I have 5 times x, 5 times 3 times x, and 5 times 28. Hopefully you notice that I'm putting like terms on top of each other. So the only number or only factor that's in all of them is 5. So that turns out to be my greatest common factor. Just like we did when we reviewed greatest common factor a couple of minutes ago, we're going to write a parentheses, and now we're going to divide out our greatest common factor. So we're going to divide everything by 5. And then what will that give us? Well, 5x squared divided by 5 is x squared. Negative 15x divided by 5 is negative 3x. And finally, negative 140 divided by 5 is negative 28. Awesome! Now we get to go straight to factoring. So let me take out some of this extra stuff here. Okay. Before you ask the question, I know what you're thinking. What exactly are we factoring? Well, we're only going to factor what's inside the parentheses. We're going to ignore the 5. We're going to leave it there. We're not going to cross it out. We're not going to erase it, but we're just going to leave it for a couple of minutes. So what we're going to do is we need to find numbers that multiply to negative 28, that add to negative 3. Okay, well, let's start thinking. I put this line in here just so you can see my numbers. They get kind of squished sometimes, so let's look. I know that 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. And 7 minus 4, or 7 plus a negative 4, is the same thing as 3. But once again, I don't want 3. I want a negative 3. But just like in the last one, do you notice we have a different signs? So what if we change the signs? What if I take negative 7 times 4? Well, it's still negative 28. Perfect. If I take negative 7 plus 4, we get negative 3. Voila! That's what we want. Our next step? Well, we're going to make our parentheses. So I'm going to have x minus 7. So the negative 7 or the minus 7 comes from right here. And then our other parentheses, of course, we're going to have x plus 4, and that comes from right here. And once again, remember, we could also write it as x plus 4 times x minus 7. Remember, that's the associative property. Doesn't matter how we write it. When we FOIL, like I showed you in the last one, they're going to turn out to be the same. So what's my answer going to look like? Well, we have to keep our 5. That's important. But now, instead of writing this, we're going to write the factored form, which is x minus 7 times x plus 4. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip that, well, as an instructor, it drives me crazy, and it might drive some of your teachers crazy too. You always have to have these touching, because this means to multiply. Let me write it here. Some students will write it, let me put it down here in the right corner. Some students will go like this. Well, what does this mean? Right? No, they have to be touching each other. They have to be touching each other because that is the only way we know that they're being multiplied. So that's my answer. Remember I said we can check by foiling? So let's do it. Let me erase some of this here. So we have 5, and I'm going to FOIL. So I'm going to take x times x, which is x squared, x times 4, which is 4x, negative 7 times 4 is negative 7x, and then finally negative 7 times 4, which is negative 28. My next step, of course, I'm bringing this down. X squared is just x squared, but 4x minus 7x is negative 3x, and then finally we have negative 28. Our last step in foiling and checking is we have to distribute the 5. So 5 times x squared is 5x squared. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15x. And finally, 5 times negative 28 is negative 140. Oh my goodness, do you notice that they're the same? Ugh, that's awesome. So that tells us this is the solution. This is the factored form. Perfect. All right, what we're going to do next is I'm going to show another example, and then I'm going to give you 2 to practice. So let's look at the example first. Is there a greatest common factor? Well, let's see. And of course, some of you will say, hey, I can see it right away, but that's okay because some of us don't quite see it. So let's figure it out. So 4x squared is 4 times x times x. 4x is 4 times x, and then 8 is 4 times 2. You notice that I wrote like factors on top of each other. So it turns out that 4 is our greatest common factor. Rewrite it here so I have 4 in a parentheses. That means I'm going to divide everything by 4. So 4g squared divided by 4 is g squared. 4g divided by 4 is g. And negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. Awesome. We're going to factor what's inside the parentheses. And we need to think of factors that multiply to negative 2, this guy, and add to 1, which is this guy. Remember, if we don't have a number in front of the letter, it's assumed to be 1. So now we got to start thinking. I know that 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, and that works here. 2 plus negative 1 is 1. Hey, we got it right away. I'm going to have g plus 2 times g minus 1. Where am I getting those again? Here's my 2, and here's my negative 1. I know, how crazy is that? It's like super easy. We could also have g minus 1 times g plus 2. Oh my gosh, I just complained about this, and here we have it. Now, some of you might be asking, well, when would I get this? What if you had negative 1 times 2 equals negative 2, and then negative 1 plus 2 equals 1? That would give us, if we followed this, g minus 1, get that in there, okay, and then g plus 2. So that's how we would get this one. But remember, they're exactly the same. So let's rewrite it here. So we have our 4 on the outside, okay, having them touch, okay, and then we have g plus 2 times g minus 1, perfect. That actually turns out to be our factored form, but we should always check. We should always check by foiling. We're going to do the first, which is g times g, which is g squared. Outside, which is g times negative 1, which is negative g. Our inside, which is 2 times g, which is 2g. And then finally, the last, which is 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. Our next step once again, notice I bring down my 4 in the parentheses. We have g squared. The negative 1g plus 2g is just g plus g. And then we have negative 2. Last, I know I keep saying last step, but this is the last step. We need to distribute to make sure it looks like our original. We need to make sure it looks like this guy. 4 times g squared is 4g squared. 4 times g is 4g. And 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Oh my goodness. Do you notice something? Let me erase this here. This looks just like that. Wow, we did it. So guess what? My answer, when we factor it, is 4 times g plus 2. Make my parentheses hook, okay. And then g minus 1. Or we could have 4 times g minus 1. Make sure my parentheses hook, okay. And then g plus 2. Yay! How cool is that? And of course, 4g squared plus 4g minus 8 looks just like the original. Ugh, doesn't it just make you so happy? Yay! Here are 2 for you to try. What I need you to do is pause the video. I want you to do the factoring. Some of them might have a greatest common factor, maybe not. And then when you're done, press play to check. So you need to pause now and factor. All right, this is when we're going to check to see what you did. Remember, the first thing we ask, is there a greatest common factor? Not sure. So let's write them out. 3y squared, 27y, and 54. That gives us, so 3y squared is 3 times y. Awesome. 27y is 3 times 9 times y. Okay. And 54 happens to be 3 times 18. All right, well, it looks like our only greatest common factor is going to be this one. Even if I had written the 18 as times 9 times 2, we still don't have a 9 here, so that can't be my greatest common factor. So that means our greatest common factor is 3. We're going to divide it out. I'm going to write my 3, which is my greatest common factor, divided by 3, so I have y squared. Divide by 3 is 9y. And then finally, divide by 3, and we have 18. Awesome. Now allow me to erase some of this over here, because we're going to need a little more room. We're going to multiply to 18, and we need to add to 9. Okay, here's my 18, and here's my 9. I know that 6 times 3 is 18, and let's see when we add them. 6 plus 3 is 9. Wow, how much more perfect can we get it? What is it going to factor into? Well, we're going to have y, because we have y's here, plus 6. We have a positive 6. Hook my parentheses, and then y plus 3. Well, y plus 3 is because we have a positive 3 here. Our final answer is 3 parentheses y plus 6 times, make sure I get this good here, it's hard, I know, and then y plus 3, or you could have found 3 times y plus 3 parentheses y plus 6. So either one of these is perfect. That would be the factor form. And I'm going to leave you to foil it and to check it. I'm running out of space here, but trust me, it works. Let's look at the next one. Once again, we have to ask, is there a greatest common factor? Yeah, I don't know. So let's write it out. Let's write our factors out. 3x squared, 6x, and 21. We're not worried about the positive and negatives right now. So this will be 3 times x times x. This will be 3 times 2 times x. So this one will be 3 times 7. Hopefully everybody can see that our greatest common factor is 3 again. Wow. So let's make our 3 parentheses. I'm going to divide out a 3. So 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. 6x divided by 3 is 2x. Negative 21 divided by 3 is negative 7. All right, so we need to multiply to negative 7, and we have to add to 2. I know that negative 7 times 1 is negative 7. Negative 7 plus 1 is negative 6, so that doesn't work. Well, our only other choice is 7 times negative 1, which is negative 7. Well, 7 plus negative 1 is 6, and those are our only choices. So it turns out this is the factored form. X squared plus 2x minus 7 is called prime, P-R-I-M-E. That means it's not factorable any further. This is going to be our answer. How'd you do? I'm sure you did great. Well, don't worry if you didn't, because we have more to look at. Let's look at this one. This is example 4. First thing we always ask, is there a greatest common factor? Nope, because I have a 1 and a 6 and a 16. No greatest common factor. So we're going to go straight into multiply. We need to multiply to negative 16, and we're going to add to 6. All right, so let's start thinking. Well, I know that negative 1 times 16 is negative 16, and that works for multiplication. And negative 1 plus 16 is 15. No, that one doesn't quite work. We need to think of something else. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. The multiplication works. But when we go to adding, negative 4 plus 4 is 0, and that doesn't work. Wow, we need to keep going. I know that negative 2 times 8 is negative 16. So once again, the multiplication works. Negative 2 plus 8 is 6. I can't believe it. We found it, right? So we're going to have x minus 2 times x plus 8. Of course, I'm getting the minus 2 from our negative 2 there. And of course, the plus 8 from our plus 8. Or we could also have x plus 8 times x minus 2. For this case, I could have 8 plus negative 2 is also 6. So it just depends what number I have coming first. But remember, it doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter, because when we FOIL, we end up with the same answer. So what is our answer going to be? Either one of these is perfect. That is our factored form. But we should probably check just in case. So, x minus 2 times x plus 8. First is x times x, which is x squared. Outside is x times 8, which is 8x. Inside is negative 2 times x, which is negative 2x. And last is negative 2 times 8, which is negative 16. We need to collect like terms. That means we're going to put these two together. 8 minus 2 is 6, so we have 6x minus 16. And oh my gosh, I can't believe it. They're exactly the same. So that means that we did it. Either one of these is our answer. Now it's your turn to do a little work. What you're going to do is you're going to pause the video, you're going to factor these two, and then you're going to press play to check. So how do you think you did? Well, let's see how you did. The first thing we always ask, is there a greatest common factor? Well, for this one, there isn't. We have a 1 and a 1 and a 12. There's no greatest common factor other than 1, and, well, that really doesn't help us. So we go straight to our multiplication. So we want to multiply to negative 12, and we want to add to a positive 1. And that's this guy right here. Well, let's start thinking. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. So that works there. But negative 2 plus 6 is 4. So that's not going to quite work, because remember, it has to add to a positive 1. What about 4 times negative 3? Well, that gives us negative 12. Cool. And 4 plus negative 3 is 1. Awesome. x squared plus x minus 12 actually factors into x plus 4 times x minus 3. I get my 4 right here and my minus or my negative 3 right here. If you had written negative 3 plus 4, you're still correct, but yours would factor like this: x minus 3 times x plus 4. Now remember, they're both perfect answers. They're both solutions. They're both the factored form. So either one, not both of them, either one. Let's look at our next one. Once again, we ask, is there a greatest common factor? Well, we have a 1, a 3, and a negative 4. No. No, we need to figure out our multiplication. So we want to multiply to negative 4, and we want to add to 3. I know that negative 2 times 2 is negative 4, but negative 2 plus 2 is 0, so that's not going to work. What about negative 1 times 4? That's still negative 4. Negative 1 plus 4 is 3. Wow, we're good. So that will be our factored form. X minus 1 times x plus 4. You could have written it 4 plus negative 1 is 3. That also works, because remember, it doesn't matter which one comes first. They're both solutions. Because remember, it doesn't matter what comes first, because they both will FOIL back into this. So once again, either one, but not both. Okay? So if you're doing this for your homework, just write this one or this one. You don't need to write both of them. Okay? All right. Let's look at our next example. Once again, we have to ask, is there a greatest common factor? Well, in this case, there's not. So how do I know that? Well, I have a 1 and an 11 and a 30, and there's no factors in common other than 1. Nope, there's no greatest common factor. So we're going to start out with multiply. So we need to multiply to 30, and we are going to add to 11. All right, well, I know that 30 is 3 times 10, and that equals 30. But 3 plus 10 is 13. It's not going to work. What about 5 times 6? Well, 5 times 6 is 30. Cool. So we just did it. Wow. We have x plus 5 times x plus 6. Where did I get the 5? Plus 5 right here. And where did I get the plus 6? From right there. We could also have x plus 6 times x plus 5. Remember, it just depends. If I had 6 times 5 equals 30, then I would have 6 plus 5 equals 11. Remember, it doesn't matter, but let's check by FOILing. So x plus 5 times x plus 6. So x times x is x squared. X times 6 is 6x. 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times 6 is 30. We're going to have x squared. Hopefully you see that 6x plus 5x is our 11x. And then 30. This is great. So what does that mean? Well, this is our solution, or this is our solution. Either one of those is the factored form, but not both, just one or the other. Now here's your turn to practice. So here's 2 more for you to try. You're going to pause the video, complete it, and then press play to check. All right, let's see how you did. First of all, we always have to ask, is there a greatest common factor? Well, there's not, because we have a 1, an 8, and a 7. So we go straight to our multiply. So we're going to multiply to 7, and we're going to add to 8. Well, the only thing that multiplies to 7 is 1 times 7. Well, that's cool. And it just turns out that 1 plus 7 is 8. Oh my goodness. Therefore, our factored form is y plus 1 times y plus 7. Maybe you had 7 plus 1 equals 8. Well, then that case, you'll have y plus 7 times y plus 1. Remember, it's either or. You're not going to write both of them, just one or the other. Let's look at the second one here. Do I have a greatest common factor here? Ugh, no. But that's okay. We can go straight to our multiplication. So we're going to multiply to 27, but we have to add to 12. Well, let's see. I know that 3 times 9 is 27. And 3 plus 9, wow, look at that, is 12. Once again, we're really good. My factored form will be x plus 3 times x plus 9. Maybe you wrote 9 plus 3 is 12. Well, that's good too. Then your factored form would look like x plus 9 times x plus 3. But remember, it's either one, not both. So if you write this one, you're perfect. Or if you wrote this one, you're also perfect. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video with me. I've certainly enjoyed you visiting today. Video guides and worksheets are available for purchase for all the picrustable supplemental series on YouTube, and they're found at Teachers Pay Teachers. Make sure to subscribe too, because you don't want to miss the new videos. I'm making them all the time because I just love this stuff. Have a request? Let me know. Go to picrustable@gmail.com, or you can put your question in the YouTube comment box below because I check those. Once again, thanks for watching. I really enjoyed you being here, and I really enjoyed showing you how to factor.